You've probably wondered, maybe in the silence after a love has ended, maybe in the chaos of its beginning. Why do people fall in love with you? What is it exactly that draws them in so deeply, sometimes irrationally, sometimes with a devotion that doesn't even seem to make sense? Is it your personality, your presence, your confidence, or perhaps your vulnerability? Or could it be something far deeper, something invisible yet unmistakably powerful? Something ancient unfolding beneath the surface of conscious awareness? Carl Jung believed that love, true love, or at least the sudden magnetic pull that disguises itself as love, has very little to do with what is visible and everything to do with what lies hidden in both you and them. Because no one really falls in love with you not as you are. They fall in love with what you awaken. And what you awaken has nothing to do with performance. It has to do with the unconscious, and the unconscious is always searching. Jung called it projection. The unconscious, unable to find expression within us, directly spills outward. It finds faces, voices, movements in others, people who remind us of what we've lost, denied, or longed for, but never touched. And when we meet someone who matches that internal image, something happens. We feel like we've known them forever. We feel seen without explanation. We call it chemistry, we call it fate, we call it love. But in truth, what we're meeting is a part of ourselves reflected through them, and they are doing the same. This is why some connections are instant and overwhelming, even if the people themselves are strangers. Your soul isn't recognizing the person, it's recognizing the symbol. The architecture of an inner truth you haven't yet embodied, mirrored back in the form of another human being. This is the first reason people fall in love with you, because you represent something they have lost, repressed, or never fully developed within themselves. You aren't just attractive, you're symbolic. To the one who has buried their emotions under stoicism, your expressive depth becomes magnetic. To the one who has always been organized and restrained, your chaos feels like freedom. To the one who has never allowed themselves to be soft, your tenderness feels like salvation. They don't see you. They see themselves, what they could be, what they should be, what they fear they'll never be. And the moment you appear, it feels like their soul is being called forward, not toward you, but toward their own becoming. This is why your presence has power beyond logic. You stir something within them. You awaken a potential they thought was dead. But here's the paradox. Because what draws them to you is also what they may unconsciously resent when you reveal you are not just an archetype, but a person, with flaws, with contradictions, with limits. The same fire that drew them in now burns too brightly, and they back away. Not because you changed, but because their projection failed. You see, people don't fall in love with who you are. They fall in love with who they hope to become through you. And if they are not ready to meet that part of themselves directly, they'll retreat. Sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, sometimes violently. They'll blame you. They'll tell you that you changed, but what really changed was their ability to maintain the fantasy, and in that space, heartbreak blooms. Not because of betrayal, but because of broken illusion. Jung did not see this as failure. In fact, he believed this was the sacred purpose of relationship, to bring what is unconscious into consciousness, to use the mirror of love not to flatter the ego, but to confront the soul. And so even if the love burns out, even if they walk away, the truth remains. You were a catalyst. You didn't fail to be loved. You fulfilled a deeper function. You stirred a sleeping self within them. You lit the match that their soul had been waiting for, and whether they used that flame to illuminate their truth or burn down their comfort zone was never in your control. What matters is this: you were never meaningless. You were never just a phase. You were a symbol in their inner architecture, and that is sacred. Now let's look at the second reason someone falls in love with you. It's not because you represent something they lack, but because you match an unconscious image they've carried their whole life. Jung called this the anima and the animus. Every man carries within him a deep image of the feminine. Not a woman, but the feminine principles shaped by his early experiences with women, especially his mother, but also by collective stories and symbols inherited from myth culture and the collective unconscious. Likewise, every woman carries within her an unconscious image of the masculine again, not a man, but the archetypal masculine essence shaped by father, experience, and ancient symbolic structures of the psyche. These inner figures are not conscious. They are not preferences. They are deep-rooted expectations, desires, fears. They are emotionally charged templates. And one day, seemingly out of nowhere, you walk into someone's life and embody that image. You match the architecture. You fit the mold, not in the way you dress or speak, but in your essence. And suddenly, they are spellbound. They may call it soul recognition. They may feel destiny or past life connection. They may say, I've never felt anything like this before. And they're right, because it's not about you. It's about their unconscious seeing a long-lost image come alive. And in that moment, they are overwhelmed with emotion. Not because of your personality, but because of the symbolic role you now play. You are no longer just a person. You have become the container of their psyche's deepest image of love. But there is danger here too. Because the anima and animus are not human. They are perfect, sacred, eternal. And no human being can live up to a projection that large forever. At some point, the image begins to crack. You say something they didn't expect. You reveal a part of yourself they didn't imagine. You make a mistake. You contradict the myth. And the idealized projection begins to collapse. You, who were once a goddess or a god in their eyes, become human. And if they are not ready to love a human, they will leave. Not because you did anything wrong, but because their psyche can no longer sustain the illusion. And this too is sacred. Because what they call heartbreak is actually the birth of awareness. You did not fail. You fulfilled the projection. You carried it long enough for it to rise to the surface. And now, if they choose, they can reclaim that energy for themselves. They can begin the real journey, not of seeking love outside, but of integrating the sacred masculine or feminine within. So now you begin to see love is never just about the surface. It's not about the smile, the confidence, the laughter you share. It's not even about compatibility in the way the world measures it. Love is the soul's search for wholeness. It is the unconscious reaching out again and again, trying to complete its internal circle. And the ones we fall for most deeply are often the ones who carry the key not to our comfort, but to our evolution. That's why it hurts. That's why it changes you. Because love, in the Jungian sense, is an alchemical fire. It doesn't come to soothe you, it comes to transform you. The people who ignite your soul are rarely the ones who stay. They are the ones who burn through your illusions, awaken the dormant parts of you, and then leave you to decide what to do with what's been uncovered. You feel like they've taken something from you, but what really happened is that they left behind something far more valuable. A question, a mirror, a confrontation. You begin to ask, why was I so drawn to them? What was it about them that made me feel so alive? What was I really looking for in their eyes? If you sit with those questions, not to spiral in pain, but to observe, to learn, you'll begin to see patterns, and those patterns will lead you back not to them, but to you. To the wounded child, still seeking the mother who could never hold her. To the abandoned son still searching for the father who never looked back. To the part of you that never felt enough trying to earn love one more time by becoming what someone else desires. This is not weakness. This is not obsession. This is psychological truth. Because your attraction was never about them, it was about the image they awakened in you. They were a portal to your inner world. And now that the portal has closed, you are left not with a void, but with a map. A sacred invitation to individuate, to become the version of you that no longer needs someone else to reflect your wholeness because you have claimed it for yourself. But here's where most people get stuck. They either try to chase the projection, desperately trying to find someone new who mirrors the same qualities, or they try to numb it, pushing the experience down, calling it a mistake, dismissing it as fantasy. But both of these paths are rooted in avoidance. Avoidance of the deeper truth that the pain is not asking you to forget, it's asking you to remember. Not to remember the person, but to remember what they stirred in you. Because what they stirred wasn't theirs to give. It was yours to reclaim. Carl Jung often said that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And love, especially romantic love, is one of the most powerful disguises of all. You think it's about them. It never is. It's about the self calling you home. And the self doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in longing, in resonance, in ache, in silence, and sometimes in heartbreak. The deeper the love, the deeper the self-reflection it demands. So the next time someone falls in love with you, ask yourself, what are they seeing? What are you representing to their inner world? Is it admiration or projection? Is it connection or fantasy? And more importantly, can they love you once the illusion fades? Once the archetype crumbles? Once the human steps forward? Because if they cannot love you when the mask comes off, it was never love. It was only longing dressed in divine clothing, and the same goes for you. Who are you falling for? And more importantly, why? What do they activate in you? Is it love, or is it a reenactment? Are you drawn to them because of who they are, or because of who you become in their presence? And if they walked away tomorrow, what part of you would go with them? If your answer is all of me, then you have not yet individuated. You are still loving from the wound. And love from the wound is not love, it is survival. To love from your wholeness means this: I desire you, but I do not need you to complete me. It means I see the sacred in you, but I also see your humanness, and I do not require perfection. It means I will not hand you the keys to my self-worth and call it intimacy. This is love without possession, love without projection, love without illusion. And it is rare. Because most people are not taught to love this way. Most people are taught to seek themselves in others, to look for the father they never had, the mother they never met, the rescuer, the savior, the one who will finally stay. But until you stop projecting your unlived life onto someone else's shoulders, you will continue to repeat the same pattern again and again, calling it love. And it is not your fault. This is the collective condition of humanity. We are not broken. We are unintegrated. We are fragmented. And love becomes the place where we try to put ourselves back together. But true healing doesn't happen through fusion. It happens through reflection, through awareness, through meeting ourselves in the gaze of another, not to merge, but to remember. Not to lose ourselves, but to return. That's the gift. That's the ache. That's the awakening. Not everyone is meant to stay, but everyone is meant to reveal something. And when you stop clinging to the fantasy and start embracing the mirror, you no longer mourn love lost, you honor love fulfilled. Because even the shortest encounter, the most fleeting infatuation, the most devastating ending, was a teacher, a lesson, a chapter in your return to the self. And that return, that is where real love begins. Because when you finally stop asking, why did they love me, and begin asking, what part of them was searching for itself through me, something deep shifts. You're no longer trapped in the illusion that love is something you earn by being beautiful enough, kind enough, perfect enough. You begin to realize that love, real unconscious, archetypal love, was never about surface traits. It's about resonance. It's about the story they've carried within them since childhood, perhaps, since lifetimes before, and you through some invisible choreography of fate and timing matched the role in that myth. And when you played that part well, they were magnetized. But the moment you stepped out of character, the myth broke, and so did the bond. That's not your failure. That's their unconscious waking up to its own illusion. And the same is true when you fall in love. That instant pull, that sense of familiarity, of déjà vu, of destiny, it's not always truth. Sometimes it's the soul crying out, "Look, there you are." That forgotten part of me, that denied image, and you call it attraction. But it's a projection, and you must have the courage to ask, is what I love in them something I need to develop in myself? Because if you don't, you will keep circling around the same kind of person. You'll keep falling for the same pattern. You'll think you're unlucky in love when really you're unawake. This is where Jung's brilliance pierces deepest. He didn't ask you to stop loving. He asked you to start understanding what love reveals. He didn't shame projection, he revealed it as a step on the path toward wholeness. Because we all project. It's how we meet ourselves. But only the brave go further. Only the brave stop chasing the fantasy and start integrating the source. And when you do, when you take back the image, when you reclaim the energy, when you stop needing the other to carry your soul's unlived potential, you start to change. You become someone who doesn't fall in love just because someone feels familiar. You fall in love because someone meets you fully presently without illusion. And here's what's most revolutionary. When you become aware of why people fall in love with you, you start holding that power responsibly. You begin to notice when someone is placing you on a pedestal you didn't ask for. You begin to feel when they are loving the idea of you, not the reality. You sense it when their admiration turns to control, when their need to possess stems from their fear of facing themselves. And instead of feeding the projection, instead of performing the role, you gently, truthfully, lovingly begin to step out of the illusion. You say, "I'm not your missing piece. I'm not your savior. I'm not your fantasy. I am human. And if you still choose to love me here, then maybe we can begin something real." This is the threshold few ever cross. Because it's easier to remain desired than it is to be seen. It's easier to stay in the illusion than to risk losing the connection when the truth emerges. But what you protect through performance, you pay for with your soul. And at some point, the cost is too high. At some point, you decide, I'd rather be unloved for who I truly am than worshipped for a mask I can no longer wear. And when you live this way, when you refuse to be an actor in someone else's unconscious myth, you begin to attract differently. The people who come into your life now are not drawn to the projection. They are drawn to your presence. They don't need you to complete them. They desire to walk beside you, to grow with you, to meet themselves more deeply through the container of conscious connection. These relationships are less fiery, perhaps, less intoxicating, but they are steady, clear, deep, because they are built on reality, not archetype. Jung called this the process of individuation, the movement from fragmentation to wholeness. And love, conscious love, is one of its most sacred tools because it gives us access to the parts of ourselves we would never dare face alone. Love strips us bare. Love confronts us with our deepest need. Love demands we become. And when it's rooted in awareness, not in fantasy, that confrontation becomes liberation. But it's not a straight path. You'll still fall. You'll still get caught. You'll still be seduced by the myth. That's human. That's divine. The goal is not to avoid projection. It's to recognize it, to become aware of it as it arises, to feel the pull, the chemistry, the spark, and instead of surrendering blindly, to pause and ask, what in me is being awakened here? Is this love, or is this longing wearing a beautiful disguise? Because longing isn't wrong. It's sacred. But longing must be integrated. It must lead you inward, not just outward. Otherwise, it becomes addiction, and addiction to love is the most devastating kind. It looks like passion, but it's pain. It looks like depth, but it's desperation. It looks like connection, but it's captivity. You weren't born to be a prisoner of your own projections. You were born to be free. So take a moment now. Think of someone who once loved you so deeply it confused you. Someone who said, "You changed my life," or "I've never felt this before," and then disappeared. Think of someone you loved with your entire being, who awakened something unspeakable inside you and then shattered it. What if that person wasn't here to stay? What if they were here to stir? What if their role in your life was never to fulfill you, but to awaken the part of you that you needed to reclaim? And what if the same is true for you, that someone right now is remembering you, not with anger, not with longing, but with quiet gratitude? Because when they loved you, they saw a part of themselves for the first time, and even if it ended, even if it broke, it made them more whole. That is what love really does. It doesn't complete you. It reflects you. And yet, even knowing all of this, it's still hard, isn't it? Because part of you still wants it to be simple. Still wishes love were clean, predictable, safe. You want to believe that someone will look at you fully, see you and never flinch. Never project, never run, never shatter under the weight of their own awakening. But that's not how love works. At least not at first. Because before love can become a sanctuary, it must first be a storm. It must stir the unconscious. It must expose the masks. It must pull forward all the shadows that have waited silently in the corners of your being. And if you're not ready, if you're still hiding, still hoping that someone else will love the parts you refuse to claim, the storm will destroy you. But if you are ready, if you are willing to be transformed rather than simply held, love becomes sacred. This is why people fall in love with you, not because you complete them, but because you disturb them in the most necessary way. You awaken the archetype. You reflect the ideal. You trigger the wound. You activate the myth. And they are drawn to it not because they are shallow, but because they are souls in search of their own lost pieces. And for a brief moment, you carry that piece. You embody the forgotten parent, the idealized lover, the sacred twin. You become the doorway to their inner world. But every doorway comes with a cost. Because once they step through, once they meet the part of themselves that was calling through your presence, they no longer need the container. And if they are not conscious of this process, they will do what humans have always done when faced with deep psychological truth. They will run. They will say, "You've changed." They will say, "This isn't what I thought it was." They will say, "I'm just not ready." And they will leave. But don't confuse that with rejection. It's not rejection. It's revelation. It's the psyche completing its cycle. Jung warned us, whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. That means the people who fall in love with you are never just responding to you. They are responding to the event you represent, the internal reckoning that your presence brings. And when they're not ready to integrate it, they blame the trigger. But you were never the problem. You were the mirror. And sometimes people shatter mirrors instead of facing themselves. And so you must ask yourself, can you hold this kind of love without losing yourself? Because it's tempting, isn't it, to become what they see in you? To keep performing the role they've projected, to stay beautiful, mysterious, wise, calm, or nurturing whatever their image demands. Because the moment you step out of it, they begin to pull away. And you feel that pull. You feel the temperature shift, and your inner child, still craving to be chosen, begins to panic, begins to perform again, begins to try harder. But this is where the real transformation lives. In the moment, when you choose truth over performance, when you choose authenticity over attachment, when you say, "If I must be loved for a mask, I would rather not be loved at all." Because only then do you create the space for real connection. Only then do you send out the signal to the universe, "I am done being a mirror. I am ready to be met," and that signal will not be answered by many, but it will be answered by the ones who have done the same. The ones who no longer seek to project their soul onto your skin. The ones who see you not because you reflect their myth, but because they have come home to their own. This is conscious love. It is not popular. It is not easy. It does not burn bright and die quickly. It moves slow. It builds. It listens. It waits. It stays. And you cannot attract it until you are living it within yourself. So turn inward. See what parts of you others have fallen for. Trace the patterns. Have you been loved most when you were silent, submissive, spiritual, sexy, stoic? What roles have you played? And more importantly, who were you behind those roles? Who is the self beneath the symbol? Because when you find that self, when you strip away every projection, every persona, every archetype, you begin to live in your own essence. And from there, the kind of love you attract changes. People no longer fall in love with you because you match their myth. They fall in love with you because you match their awareness. You are no longer a fantasy. You are a presence. And that kind of love, it doesn't shatter under pressure. It doesn't vanish when the image cracks. It deepens, it expands, it heals. This is what you are made for. Not the fleeting worship of projection, but the enduring sanctuary of truth. Not to be idolized, but to be known. Not to be someone's missing piece, but to walk beside them as they reclaim their own. You are not a screen for someone else's unconscious movie. You are not a replacement parent. You are not the embodiment of someone's ideal feminine or sacred masculine. You are a soul, whole, real, here. And when you live from that truth, you become magnetic in a different way, a deeper way, a quieter way. You attract not with intensity, but with presence, not with performance, but with integrity, not because you awaken the unconscious, but because you've already integrated it. And that is the rarest love of all. So now we arrive here at the still point. The moment after the storm has passed, after the myths have crumbled, after the illusions have shattered. You stand not as a vessel for someone else's longing, but as your own sovereign being. And here in this quiet place you ask the most important question. If I am no longer performing, no longer being a mirror, who am I really? Who am I when no one is looking to me for their salvation? Who am I when I'm not being fallen in love with for the traits I accidentally represent? This is the true birth of the self. Because for much of our lives, we build identities out of what others project onto us. We become the good girl, the provider, the mystery, the rebel, the healer, not because we choose it, but because someone once loved us for it, and we craved that love. So we wore the mask. We shaped ourselves into what others could desire, and slowly we lost access to who we were before we were needed. But when you begin to wake up, when you see the projections for what they are, you reclaim all the parts of you that were hidden beneath the mask. The messy parts, the quiet parts, the contradictory, chaotic, uncurated parts. And you bring them back into the light. You say, this too is me. You say, I am not just your savior, your muse, your mother, your fantasy. I am also the one who cries, who doubts, who fails, who feels deeply. And the moment you say that without apology, you become whole again. Because that's what love in its truest form invites, not idealization, but integration. This is why Jung saw falling in love not as a goal, but as a spiritual initiation. When someone is drawn to you with that fierce, irrational pull, when they say, I can't explain it, but I feel like I've known you forever, they are not just complimenting you. They are unknowingly confessing, you have activated something sacred in me. And whether they are ready to walk that path, whether they stay or go, whether they honor it or flee from it, that's their journey. But you must know their love for you was real. Not because it was sustainable, but because it revealed. It showed you who you are to others, what you represent, what archetype your soul calls forth. And more importantly, it showed you where you still abandon yourself. Where you still become what is needed instead of what is true. Where you still hand over your wholeness in exchange for temporary belonging. You don't need to do that anymore. You are not here to be adored by unconscious projections. You are here to be seen in conscious presence, to be loved for your fullness, not for the image you carry, to be cherished not just for your beauty or power or mystique, but for your humanity. And the only way to attract that kind of love is to live it. To be the kind of person who no longer idolizes or idealizes, who no longer confuses intensity for intimacy, who can sit across from someone and say, I see the image you're projecting onto me and I refuse to act it out, who can hold the silence when the fantasy collapses and the real work begins, because love is work, not laborious work, but sacred work, psychological work, soul work. It requires presence, patience, courage, a willingness to see and be seen, not just in your light, but in your shadow. Jung understood this better than most. He knew that the people who trigger you most deeply are the ones who mirror what you've yet to claim. That falling in love is rarely about the other person. It's about the unconscious finally recognizing itself in form. And that recognition, it can change your life. It can awaken you. It can also destroy your illusions, break your habits, force you to grow. And that's the point. Because if you love consciously, every relationship becomes a rite of passage. You stop asking, why didn't they stay, and start asking, what did they reveal? You stop chasing those who abandon you and start listening to what their absence taught you about your own abandonment wound. You stop needing someone to carry your soul's image and you begin to embody it yourself. This is what ends the cycle. This is what breaks the trauma bonds. This is what transforms you from a passive receiver of love into a conscious co-creator of love. Not the shallow, ego-based love that fades the moment reality sets in, but the real love that survives disillusionment, that thrives in truth, that expands when the projection ends. And when you love this way, something beautiful happens. Even when the relationship ends, the love doesn't. Because it was never about control or fantasy. It was about awakening. And what has been awakened cannot be put back to sleep. So the next time someone falls in love with you, see it clearly. Ask yourself, what image are they falling for? What energy do I embody for them? And am I willing to stay rooted in my truth, even if it means the fantasy dies? And the next time you fall in love with someone, ask, what part of me are they mirroring? What image of the sacred do they represent to my unconscious? And am I truly loving them, or am I loving the part of me I've projected onto them? These questions do not kill romance. They sanctify it. They strip away the illusion so that intimacy can begin. They transform the bond from a myth into a meeting, from a story into a sanctuary. Because in the end, love is not something that happens to you. Love is something that reveals you to yourself and to the other. And those who fall in love with you, they are not just passing lovers. They are mirrors, messengers, myths made flesh. And so are you.
In the silence that follows betrayal, there is a sound that few dare to name. It is not the voice of your enemy, nor the echo of an argument long past. It is the fracture within your own chest, the realization that the one you trusted most, the one whose smile promised safety, has turned your openness into a hunting ground. In this space, the empath learns the truth that the tenderness they carried like a gift has become a snare. The hunter has become the prey. Yet even here, Jung whispers across time, the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow. And perhaps that is what this pain truly is, not the end of love, but the confrontation with the unseen territory within your soul. You have felt the warmth of compassion stretch out from you like sunlight reaching toward others in the hope that it might nourish them. But some do not come seeking warmth. They come seeking fuel. The narcissist is not born whole. Their grandiosity is not strength, but armor forged to conceal a void they cannot bear to face. And so they feed upon those who offer light, binding themselves to your empathy until you begin to confuse their hunger for love with your duty to heal them. This is where the war begins, though it is not fought with weapons. It is fought in the silence between words, in the distortions of memory, in the gaslight that flickers just enough to make you question your own reflection. What you must understand is that the empath is not weak, though they may be made to feel so. The empath's heart is a mirror capable of perceiving what lies beneath the mask of another. But when the mirror is unguarded, when it reflects without discernment, it becomes a portal through which the narcissist may enter. They do not see your compassion as sacred, they see it as access. And yet within you the unconscious begins to stir. A question rises quiet but insistent. Why do you allow the mask of another to matter more than the truth of your own soul? This is the threshold of shadow work. You cannot walk it by clinging to the image of yourself as only kind, only giving, only pure. The shadow is the guardian of your wholeness, and it contains not just your fear of being cruel, but also your unacknowledged power. Jung taught that what you do not make conscious will appear in your life as fate. And so if you deny the part of you capable of saying no, capable of setting boundaries like stone capable even of rage, then life will summon a figure who embodies that force for you. The narcissist becomes the externalized shadow, the living reminder of what you have exiled within yourself. There is a moment always when the empath begins to notice the pattern. The flattery that once felt like warmth now feels like a net. The apologies ring hollow, rehearsed. The cycles of idealization and devaluation carve into the psyche until doubt becomes a constant undertow. In dreams, perhaps, you begin to see symbols, a predator circling a house with shattered windows, a child crying in the dark. The unconscious does not lie. It offers you images that bypass your rationalizations, pointing you toward what you have refused to see in waking life. Dreams become guides, and if you dare to listen, they whisper, "The danger is not outside you. It is inside the split between who you truly are and who you pretend to be." The persona that mask you wear for the world tells you to be agreeable, to always understand, to forgive endlessly. But beneath it, the self begins to stir like a lion in its sleep. It knows you are more than your role. It knows your essence is not defined by being consumed. And so the tension grows. The empath clings to their image of goodness, while the self demands a fuller truth that you are both light and darkness, both healer and destroyer, both prey and predator. Until you can hold these opposites within life, will keep forcing them upon you from without. And here in the crucible of this struggle, something extraordinary can begin. You realize that suffering is not punishment but initiation. To be betrayed is to be awakened. To be consumed is to be shown where your own boundaries have dissolved. To encounter the narcissist is to confront the mirror of your denied strength. And though it feels like war, the battle is not truly against them. It is against the fragmentation within your own psyche, the split that leaves you vulnerable to those who would feed on your light. Listen carefully now. Every time you silenced your anger to preserve peace, every time you sacrificed your need to protect someone else's comfort, every time you allowed yourself to be diminished in order to feel loved, you were laying the groundwork for this encounter. And yet within those very wounds lies the possibility of rebirth. For when the empath finally turns inward and sees the shadow not as an enemy, but as an ally, the entire dynamic begins to change. You realize you do not need to be prey. You realize the hunter was never outside you, but within, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be given form. So ask yourself, what part of you has been exiled for the sake of harmony? What power have you disowned, leaving it to emerge only in the masks of others? Can you feel the weight of that hidden self pressing against the door of your consciousness, demanding recognition? Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is where you now stand, on the threshold of illumination, staring into the abyss, not to fall, but to retrieve what you left behind. Do not rush this. Do not try to escape the pain too quickly, for it is in the descent that the seeds of ascent are planted. What feels like breaking is often the beginning of integration. What feels like weakness is the first stirring of strength, and what feels like betrayal is in truth the invitation to finally meet yourself. There is a silence that comes after awakening, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of reorientation. You begin to notice how the very air feels different when you withdraw your energy from the one who fed upon it. The narcissist's presence once seemed to fill the room, to dictate the rhythm of your heartbeat. But as your gaze shifts inward, the illusion begins to dissolve. Their power was never absolute. It was always tethered to the way you abandoned yourself for them. And now, as you turn back toward your own depths, you begin to see how much of you has been waiting, buried unseen, like treasure hidden beneath centuries of sand. This is the place Jung described as the confrontation with the shadow. The empath who avoids conflict, who forgives too quickly, who carries the burden of other people's pain as though it were their own. This empath must finally meet the forgotten side of themselves. Within that shadow are all the voices that were silenced in childhood, the voice that wanted to say no, the voice that wanted to cry out, the voice that wanted to stop being endlessly responsible for everyone else's emotions. These voices did not disappear. They sank into the unconscious where they became fuel for projection, drawing in figures like the narcissist, who embody what you will not. Look closely at this pattern. The narcissist does not simply enter your life by accident. They arrive as a living archetype, the embodiment of what you are unwilling to see in yourself. They are the mirror of your unclaimed authority, your unmet anger, your hidden will. In the face of their domination, you are offered a choice to remain fragmented and victimized, or to reassemble yourself piece by piece until the wholeness of who you are can no longer be used against you. It is in this stage that dreams often intensify. Perhaps you dream of being chased, and no matter how fast you run, the predator always closes in. Perhaps you dream of drowning, unable to breathe beneath waves that pull you deeper and deeper. These dreams are not punishments. They are enactments of the struggle within your psyche. The pursuer is your shadow, demanding to be faced. The drowning is your unconscious, reminding you that you cannot live on the surface alone. To integrate the shadow is to stop running, to turn and face what hunts you, and in doing so, to see that it was never the enemy, it was always a part of you longing to return home. The empath learns something profound in this turning, that to set boundaries is not cruelty but clarity, that to speak truth even when it disappoints others is not betrayal but authenticity, that to allow anger its rightful place is not to lose compassion but to expand into wholeness. Jung insisted that wholeness is not perfection, but the ability to hold the opposites of our nature without being torn apart by them. And so you begin to experiment with this truth. You practice saying no without apology. You practice standing still when the narcissist's storm rises, refusing to be swept into their chaos. You practice recognizing that their hunger is not your responsibility and their emptiness is not yours to fill. And yet, the war within is not finished. For every time you assert your truth, the old fear arises. Will I still be loved? Will I be abandoned? Will I become like them if I allow my strength to surface? These questions haunt the threshold of transformation. But if you dare to hold them without rushing for easy answers, you begin to notice something subtle. The very self you feared losing when you stopped overgiving is the self that finally begins to emerge. The archetypes within you stir in response. The persona once rigid and polished begins to crack, revealing the deeper layers beneath. The anima, or animus. The inner counterpart that bridges your conscious mind with the depths of the unconscious, rises in dreams, offering guidance through symbols, whispering of qualities you have neglected. Perhaps the inner feminine brings you images of receptivity, reminding you to listen to your intuition. Perhaps the inner masculine calls forth courage, reminding you to speak with authority. These encounters are not fantasies, they are movements of the soul guiding you toward individuation, toward becoming who you truly are, rather than who you thought you had to be. And in this unfolding, the narcissist loses their grip, not because they change, but because you no longer provide the ground for their performance. Their grandiosity no longer seduces you because you have begun to see the wound beneath it. Their criticism no longer destroys you because you have claimed the parts of yourself they once made you doubt. Their need for control no longer binds you because you have remembered that freedom is not given, it is reclaimed. But perhaps the deepest revelation is this. You realize the narcissist was never just another person. They were also a messenger, an archetypal figure carrying the lesson you most needed to learn. Painful as it was, they forced you to turn toward your shadow, to stop living as half of yourself, and to claim the wholeness you once fled. The hunter becomes the prey, yes. But in that moment the prey discovers they were never powerless. They discover that the predator was also a teacher. and that what seemed like destruction was in truth an initiation into the depths of the self. Stay with this realization. Let it move through you, because in recognizing it, something inside begins to shift. The empath is no longer simply the wounded one endlessly giving until nothing remains. The empath begins to embody strength, discernment, and vision. And in this shift, the war transforms. It is no longer a battle for survival, it becomes a passage into rebirth. And now you feel it, the slow and deliberate unraveling of illusions like old threads slipping free from a tapestry that once defined your entire sense of self. It is disorienting, yes, but it is also liberating, because as each false strand falls away, you begin to see what was always hidden beneath the raw, untamed fabric of your being, untouched by the roles you have been forced to play. This is the moment when the empath begins to awaken not merely from the narcissist's grasp, but from the deeper spell of their own unconscious conditioning. The truth is that the narcissist thrives on projection, but so too does the empath. You projected your goodness, your capacity for healing onto the one who could not carry it. You believed their hunger could be nourished, if only you poured enough of yourself into their void. But beneath that belief was an even deeper projection. You were trying to heal the parts of yourself you had long abandoned. The neglected child within the one who first learned that love required sacrifice was calling out for recognition. And instead of hearing that voice within you, searched for it outside, offering endless care to those who mirrored your own forgotten wounds. This is where Jung's insight cuts deep. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The narcissist's inability to empathize, their constant hunger for validation, their ruthless demand for attention. These are not simply flaws to despise. They are distorted reflections of your own inner landscape, the exiled parts of you that crave to be seen, to be valued, to be allowed their rightful place in your psyche. To recoil from them is to recoil from yourself. To confront them is to begin the long process of integration. The suffering then is not random. It is the psyche's attempt at balance, the unconscious pressing upon you through the theater of relationships. What feels like betrayal is also a revelation that you can no longer survive by living as half a person, that to disown your strength, your voice, your rightful anger is to attract those who will embody it for you mercilessly until you reclaim it. And so the war between the empath and the narcissist becomes a mirror of the war within the war between your persona and your shadow, between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. The empath persona whispers, "Be gentle, be forgiving, never cause harm." But the shadow growls beneath, "I will not be silenced, I will not be devoured, I will not bow." Only when these voices meet, when they are allowed to coexist within you, does the cycle begin to break. Notice how the body responds when you begin to claim this truth. The chest that once tightened with guilt when you said no begins to expand with breath. The stomach that once knotted in fear of rejection begins to settle with calm. The shoulders that once slumped under the weight of responsibility begin to rise unburdened. The psyche does not shift in theory alone, it moves through flesh, through heartbeat, through the rhythm of your breath. Healing is not only seen in thought, it is embodied in presence. You may find yourself walking differently, speaking differently, even dreaming differently. In one dream, the predator may no longer chase you. Instead, you may turn to face it. And in that moment, it changes shape, perhaps into a wounded animal, perhaps into a shadow of yourself. The dream reveals what consciousness is beginning to realize, that the enemy was never absolute, but always a reflection of your own denied energy. And when you retrieve it, the hunter loses its power. But be careful here. Integration is not about becoming hard, nor is it about becoming cruel. It is not about trading empathy for indifference. Integration is about wholeness, about the ability to hold both tenderness and strength without disowning either. To love fiercely while also protecting your boundaries. To care deeply while refusing to be consumed. To forgive when it is right, but also to walk away when it is necessary. This is where the process of individuation takes root. Individuation is not self-improvement, nor is it becoming some perfected image of goodness. It is the gradual unfolding of the self, the totality that includes shadow and light, anima and animus, conscious and unconscious. The empath who integrates becomes neither victim nor oppressor. They become whole, and in that wholeness they are free. And perhaps the most astonishing revelation is this: as you step into wholeness, you no longer attract the same patterns. The narcissist who once seemed magnetic begins to lose their allure. You see through the performance, and instead of being pulled into their orbit, you remain grounded in your own. You begin to call into your life those who meet you not as prey, not as fuel, but as equals. Relationships shift from arenas of survival to places of reciprocity, where giving and receiving flow without manipulation. And yet, individuation is not a destination. It is an ongoing journey, a spiral that deepens with each turn. Every shadow you meet reveals another layer of light. Every descent into suffering contains the seed of another ascent. The war within is not ended in one battle. It is transformed into dialogue, into relationship, into the ongoing work of being fully human. So when you think of the narcissist now, do not see only the wound they inflicted. See also the doorway they opened, however unwillingly, into the depths of your own soul. Without them, you might never have turned toward your shadow. Without them, you might never have remembered that wholeness was waiting for you all along. Let this truth settle within you. You are not prey. You never were. You are the hunter of your own unconscious, the seeker of your own truth, the one who dares to descend so that you may rise. And in that courage you become something the narcissist can never touch, whole, awake, unbroken. There comes a point where the landscape of your inner world no longer resembles the battlefield it once was. The wounds are still there, etched into memory, but they no longer bleed as they did before. Instead, they become scar maps, reminders of where you have walked and what you have survived. And it is here in this terrain of healing that a new question begins to take shape. If you are no longer prey, then who are you? If you are no longer defined by rescuing, soothing, or surviving the narcissist, then what essence waits at the center of your being? This is the essence of rebirth, not a return to who you once were, but the discovery of someone you have never fully allowed yourself to be. Jung called it the emergence of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the axis around which all opposites find their balance. It is not a mask, not a role, not an identity crafted to please others. It is the deep and eternal center, the part of you untouched by manipulation, untouched by betrayal, untouched even by time. To live from this center is to step into freedom, not the shallow freedom of doing as you wish, but the profound freedom of being what you are. And yet the path to this center is not linear. Old voices still echo. The persona still tries to seduce you back into the familiar script. Be agreeable. Be forgiving. Keep the peace at any cost. The shadow still tests its strength, rising in moments of raw anger or fierce refusal. But something has shifted. You are no longer split between them. You can witness both without collapsing into either. You can let the mask fall away without fear of annihilation, and you can let the shadow speak without being overtaken. This is the first taste of integration. Notice how the world around you begins to respond when you carry yourself from this center. Conversations take on a different weight. You no longer bend every word to protect the fragile egos of others. You speak more slowly, more deliberately, not to defend yourself, but because you no longer fear your truth. You begin to notice who listens and who recoils. Some will withdraw because they cannot feed upon you anymore. Others will draw closer, recognizing in you the rare presence of authenticity. The empath who has walked through the fire of narcissistic abuse emerges with a strange kind of power, not loud or domineering but magnetic. It is the power of someone who has faced their own abyss and returned carrying light. People sense it in the steadiness of your gaze, in the calm that surrounds your words, in the refusal to be manipulated. It is not that you have become invulnerable to pain. You still feel deeply, perhaps more deeply than ever. But you no longer confuse feeling with weakness. You no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. You know now that empathy without boundaries is not love, but self-erasure, and you refuse to disappear. Dreams begin to shift too. The pursuer who once haunted you may now stand before you in stillness, transformed from predator into guide. Perhaps you walk together side by side, no longer enemies, but companions in the journey of integration. This is the psyche's way of signaling that what was once repressed has been welcomed, that the war has begun to dissolve into union. For what the unconscious longs for is not endless conflict, but wholeness. And yet wholeness is not comfort, it is responsibility. To carry your shadow consciously means you can no longer project it onto others. You can no longer blame the narcissist for embodying the power you refuse to claim. You can no longer see yourself only as victim, for now you recognize your complicity in silencing your own voice. This responsibility is not heavy, it is liberating. It means you are no longer trapped in cycles of dependence, no longer bound to patterns of betrayal. You stand as the author of your own life, awake to both the darkness and the light that dwell within you. Here lies one of Jung's most radical truths. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming real. To be real is to admit your complexity, to embrace your contradictions, to stop chasing purity, and instead embody wholeness. You are not only the empath, nor only the shadow, nor only the wounded child, nor only the reborn self. You are all of these woven together into a living tapestry. And in that tapestry nothing is wasted, not even your suffering. The narcissist fades at last into perspective. You see them not as an all-powerful figure, but as a soul deeply entangled in their own shadow, a prisoner of their own unacknowledged wounds. You may still feel sorrow for them, but it is not the sorrow that compels you to save them. It is the sorrow that recognizes the tragedy of a life lived behind a mask, cut off from the wholeness they refuse to face. You no longer confuse your compassion for their chains. You understand that their journey is their own and your freedom is to release them. And now you begin to live differently. You notice beauty again in the quiet of a morning sky, in the laughter of a child, in the way your own breath steadies you when the world grows loud. You notice how relationships feel when they are rooted in reciprocity rather than control. You notice how your body no longer contracts in fear, but opens in trust, not because others have changed, but because you have. The war within has given birth to peace, and from that peace arises a new way of being in the world. But do not mistake this peace for passivity. It is not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict. It is the grounded peace of one who has faced their inner storms and no longer fears them. It is the peace of one who can meet the gaze of another without losing themselves. It is the peace of one who knows that love does not require sacrifice of the soul, but the presence of it. Hold this truth close, for it is the fruit of your descent. You are no longer bound to be hunter or prey. You are no longer trapped in the war of masks and shadows. You are whole. And in that wholeness, you become the very thing the narcissist could never destroy: a soul that cannot be consumed, a light that cannot be extinguished, a self that has finally come home. And so the journey carries you deeper into a place where words grow quieter and images take their place. You see yourself standing at the edge of a vast mirror, its surface rippling as though alive. You lean closer, and what stares back is not only your reflection, but every face you have worn: child and caretaker, empath, and victim, healer, and wounded prey and predator. One by one they appear not to haunt you, but to remind you of what you are made of. This is the moment Jung described as the meeting with the self, the place where all opposites converge, where the fragments of your life cease to be enemies and begin to recognize one another as kin. There is grief here, but it is a holy grief. The grief of realizing how much of yourself you left behind, how many years were spent searching for validation in someone else's eyes, how much of your voice was silenced for the sake of peace. Yet, within that grief, lies an unexpected tenderness. You realize that even your strategies of survival were attempts at love, misguided perhaps, but love nonetheless. And when you see it this way, the war softens. You stop punishing yourself for the years you were prey. You begin to honor the resilience that carried you through, and you bow inward to the soul that never stopped whispering even in the silence of despair. Here in this sacred interior, the archetypes shift once more. The persona, once brittle and rigid, becomes transparent, no longer a prison, but a garment you can wear lightly, knowing it is not who you are. The shadow, once feared and denied, now stands beside you as an ally, its energy available to protect, to create, to anchor. The anima or animus, once fragmented and distant, now steps forward as guide, showing you how to live with balance between inner and outer, between soul and world. And at the center of them all, the self radiates like a still point of light, not demanding attention, but offering presence vast and unshakable. And you understand now what individuation truly means. It is not about erasing the past, nor about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming whole enough to no longer live at war with yourself. Whole enough to recognize that the narcissist was not your destiny, but your initiation. Whole enough to see that what you mistook for love was in truth a summons calling you into the depths where your soul waited to be found. From this place, relationships themselves take on a new meaning. You no longer search for completion in another because you have found the wellspring within. You no longer fear abandonment because you no longer abandon yourself. You no longer confuse control with intimacy because you know what true intimacy feels like. It is the meeting of two whole beings, neither devouring nor consumed, but standing side by side in freedom. And yet perhaps the most extraordinary shift is this: your compassion expands. Not the naive compassion that left you vulnerable, but a deeper compassion that arises from wholeness. You see the narcissist now not as a monster, but as a fragmented soul terrified of their own shadow. You do not excuse their harm, but you understand its roots. And this understanding does not bind you to them, it frees you from the bitterness that might have corroded your spirit. For you no longer need to carry hatred. You carry clarity instead. The world begins to look different through these eyes. Where once you saw only threat, you now see possibility. Where once you feared your own depths, you now find strength in them. Where once you defined yourself by wounds, you now define yourself by the light that survived them. And though the path of individuation is lifelong, though shadows will rise again in new forms, you know now that you need not fear them. For each descent carries within it the seed of ascent, and every darkness you face is only another doorway into a deeper light. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege is yours now, not given by the narcissist, not bestowed by the world, but reclaimed from within. You have walked through the archetypal war of prey and hunter, and in doing so you have remembered what the narcissist could never see, that empathy is not weakness, that tenderness is not fragility, that love is not self-erasure. You have remembered that your soul is vast, and that no mask, no shadow, no predator can diminish its radiance. And now, as you stand before that mirror of the self, watching all your faces merge into one, you understand the final truth: you were never simply the empath, never simply the prey. You were always the one who contained them all. You were always the one who could walk into the fire and return carrying light. You were always the one who could descend into shadow and emerge as wholeness. And in that realization the war ends. Not with surrender, not with victory, but with integration. So let the mirror settle. Let the ripples grow still. Look into your own eyes and see there the reflection of everything you have been, everything you are, and everything you are yet to become. This is the gift of the journey. This is the transformation that no one can take from you. This is the end of the war and the beginning of a life lived from the soul. Jung once warned that the greatest danger for modern man was not external collapse, but an invisible withdrawal of the soul. And this is where our paradox begins. Why spiritually awake people are quietly disappearing from society, not because they are defeated by it, but because they have outgrown it. Jung discovered that when a human being begins to awaken, when the unconscious starts pouring its hidden truths into consciousness, society often becomes unbearable, not because the world has changed, but because the awakened eye can no longer unsee. Today, I'll take you inside this strange vanishing act, the quiet exodus of the spiritually awake. We'll descend into Jung's insights about individuation, shadow, and the crushing weight of collective conformity. And we'll see how, In the darkness of isolation, a new kind of human is forged. Imagine a man named Elias. On the outside, he lived what most would call a good life, a stable job, friends, a predictable rhythm. But in the silence of his dreams, something monstrous began clawing its way out. He dreamed of abandoned cities, of being trapped in endless crowds where no one spoke, only mimed. Jung would say the psyche was speaking in images, exposing the suffocating persona the mask Elias wore to belong. By day, Elias laughed, nodded, shook hands. By night, he woke trembling, haunted by the silence of those dream crowds. Slowly, the daylight world began to feel unreal. The conversation seemed scripted. The rituals of work and leisure became hollow. Have you felt that too? That eerie moment when you're surrounded by people and yet entirely alone, as if some invisible wall separates you from their world. Jung taught that this is not madness. It is the first crack of awakening. The unconscious begins dismantling the fragile stage set we call normal life. And when the curtain falls, you glimpse the machinery behind it, the lies, the compromises, the false peace of conformity. It is unbearable, and it is liberating. But here lies the danger when the awakened one speaks this truth aloud. Society often recoils. Jung himself knew this exile. His break with Freud was not just an intellectual schism, it was a psychic divorce from the collective structures that could no longer contain him. He once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also knew the cost you may have to leave the banquet table of society to eat alone in the wilderness. Elias began doing what so many spiritually awake souls do. He withdrew, not with dramatic gestures, not in rebellion, but in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. He skipped gatherings. He walked alone. He turned down invitations. Not because he hated others, but because he could not betray the voice now rising from within. And this is the paradox: the more you awaken, the less you can participate in the sleepwalk of the collective. Jung would call this the pull of individuation. The psyche demands wholeness, not acceptance. And so the one who awakens begins to vanish not as an act of hostility, but of survival. Can you feel that inside yourself? The tension between your inner truth and the outer script, the quiet shame of preferring solitude to social approval, and yet, beneath that shame, the strange sense of relief as if you've finally stopped betraying your soul. This disappearance is not abandonment. It is alchemy. Jung compared individuation to a crucible. The old identity must burn so that the gold of the self can emerge. When Elias left the parties, when he refused the endless chatter, he was not rejecting humanity. He was listening to a deeper call, the call of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the center that waits to be born. But make no mistake, this path is terrifying. The shadow rises here, whispering, "You are broken. You are alone. You are mad." Jung warned that many collapse under this weight, mistaking the exodus for a failure. But for those who endure, the silence becomes a teacher. And this is where we must pause, because if you've ever felt the urge to disappear, to slip quietly out of the machinery of society, know this: you are not vanishing. You are transforming. The world may not understand. It may even mock you. But as Jung revealed, the individual who listens to the self becomes a seed for the future of humanity. Elias did not yet know this. He only knew he was walking away. And like countless others who awaken, he felt the terror of that exile. Yet in that exile, the first light of freedom flickered. When Elias first stepped into solitude, he felt as though he had entered a cavern without end. The laughter of friends became distant echoes. The warmth of belonging was replaced by the cold air of isolation. But Jung would say this descent is archetypal. To disappear from the surface is to be pulled into the underworld of the psyche, where treasures are hidden among shadows. The ancient myths Jung studied speak of this same crossing: Orpheus descending to retrieve his beloved, Christ entering the wilderness, the hero who must leave the village, pass through forests, and confront the dragon. What Elias was experiencing was not personal failure, it was initiation. And whether you realize it or not, when you too have chosen silence over noise, solitude over superficiality, you have stepped into that same myth. For Jung, individuation required confrontation with the shadow. This shadow is not evil in itself, it is everything repressed, everything unlived, everything you exiled in order to belong. And when spiritually awake people begin to disappear, they do so because the shadow has risen to demand its reckoning. Elias began to see, in his solitude, fragments of himself he had long denied: his rage, his hunger for freedom, his longing for depth. These were not enemies, they were forgotten allies. Have you noticed how society fears those who withdraw? We are told that the healthy life is one of endless participation, networking, connecting, producing. But Jung saw through this illusion. He recognized that endless busyness is often a defense against the self. The one who dares to leave society's theater begins to feel the stirrings of something vaster, and that threatens the collective, which survives only by everyone agreeing to the same script. Elias' friends began to whisper, "He's changing. He doesn't come around anymore. Something's wrong." But the truth was that something finally was becoming right. The false persona was crumbling. Jung described the persona as the mask we wear to meet the expectations of others. Useful, yes, but deadly when mistaken for the whole of who we are. Elias's withdrawal was not sickness, it was the shedding of that mask. Yet this shedding is not painless. In his journals, Jung wrote about patients who suffered terrifying dreams when they withdrew from collective life. Dreams of drowning, of being chased, of falling endlessly. Elias too began to dream of vast oceans with no shore, alone, adrift. But Jung would say the unconscious is not punishing you, it is re-educating you. Those terrifying dreams are initiation rites, demanding that you learn to swim in deeper waters. And here is where the second person, you, must step in. Have you not felt it, the sense that society's rhythm is too shallow for your soul, that conversations about money, status, gossip, leave you hungering for something else? If so, your silence is not failure. It is the opening of an inner ear. To vanish is sometimes to finally hear the whisper of the self, the voice that has been drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Jung spoke of the self as the guiding center of the psyche, larger than the ego, deeper than our conscious plans. The self often calls us through dreams, synchronicities, or the unbearable restlessness of ordinary life. That restlessness is not emptiness, it is a signal that the soul wants to move beyond conformity into destiny. For Elias, the signal grew stronger. He began to walk in forests, not just for air, but to feel the silence alive in the trees. He began to journal, not to produce, but to listen. Slowly, he realized that his withdrawal was not absence, but presence. Society had mistaken him as gone, but in truth, he was arriving into his own soul. This is the paradox. Jung loved to expose. What the world calls disappearance is often the beginning of appearance. To step back from the noise is to allow the deeper self to step forward. But here lies the warning the collective will not understand. Those who live by persona will see your silence as threat, your solitude as arrogance, your inward gaze as madness. And if you are not anchored, their judgments will pull you back into sleep. So Jung insisted on courage. He knew the path of individuation was lonely, but he also knew it was necessary. The world will ask you who you are, he once wrote. And if you do not know, the world will tell you. To disappear from society is to refuse that false answer. To vanish is to reclaim the right to discover who you truly are. And yet beware. Not all who vanish are awakening. Some disappear into bitterness, into nihilism, into endless escape. Jung would caution true individuation is not rejection, but transformation. The one who disappears must eventually return not as a conformist, but as a whole human being, capable of shaping the world from within. But Elias was not there yet. He was still in the crucible, the liminal stage between who he had been and who he was becoming. His dreams became more vivid, his silence deeper. He had not yet found the gold. He was still burning in the alchemical fire. And perhaps so are you. If you feel yourself disappearing, know this: you are not lost. You are being remade. The quiet exile is not the end. It is the furnace in which the self is forged. Elias's nights became longer than his days. The quiet house, once a refuge, now felt like a temple where strange rituals of the soul unfolded. He would light no candles, play no music, just sit in the thick silence, waiting. Sometimes the silence felt like death, a suffocating void. Other times it opened into visions, faces rising from the dark, forgotten voices echoing, fragments of childhood laughter returning like ghosts. This is what Jung meant when he said that the unconscious is not just a cellar of repressed memories, but a living sea of symbols. When you step away from society, you no longer drown in external chatter. Instead, you begin to hear the voices within. It is terrifying, because they are unfamiliar, primal, demanding, but they are also the map back to the self. The dreams grew more mythic. Elias saw a fortress, tall and impenetrable, surrounded by black waters. Inside the fortress, a child cried endlessly. He woke shaken, unable to explain. Jung would interpret the fortress as the persona, the defensive walls built to survive in society. The child is the authentic self, imprisoned by those walls. The crying is the soul's cry for liberation. You may recognize this dream, even if you've never seen it. Not the fortress itself, but the feeling, the sense of a deeper self locked away, suffocated beneath roles, obligations, expectations. And when spiritually awake people disappear from society, it is often because they can no longer ignore the cry of that imprisoned child. To stay is to betray it. To leave is to set it free. But freedom is not immediate. The withdrawal feels first like death. Jung often compared individuation to alchemy, the medieval art of turning base metal into gold. The alchemists spoke of the nigredo, the blackening the stage where the material decomposes before transformation can begin. For Elias, solitude was nigredo. His old life was dissolving, but the gold had not yet emerged. Here lies the danger. In this stage, many lose themselves. Some collapse into depression, others into addiction, others into a cynical rejection of all human bonds. Jung warned that to disappear without purpose is to rot. The key is to realize that the darkness is not punishment, it is preparation. Elias clung to this insight. In the silence, he began to notice small flames flickering in the dark, a sudden clarity in his dreams, a chance encounter with an old book that spoke to his soul, a stranger's words echoing something he had just written in his journal. Jung called these synchronicities meaningful coincidences that signal the self is guiding you, weaving the outer world with your inner transformation. Have you ever felt it? That uncanny alignment. when events seem orchestrated by something beyond chance. That is the self reminding you you are not lost. You are being led. But even synchronicities cannot remove the terror of solitude. The shadow still hovered. Elias saw in himself the capacity for rage, for selfishness, for cruelty. He recoiled. But Jung insisted to know your shadow is not to be corrupted, but to be made whole. What you deny controls you. What you face can be integrated. And here you must pause to reflect on yourself. Think of the parts you exile: your anger, your jealousy, your desire for power, your longing for freedom. Society tells you to suppress them to remain acceptable. But the awakened soul discovers these energies are not meant to be destroyed. They are meant to be transmuted. To reclaim them is to reclaim your vitality. Elias began experimenting. When he felt anger, he no longer buried it. He listened. Beneath the anger was the voice of his boundaries, long ignored. When he felt loneliness, he sat with it until it revealed a truth he had been using others to escape himself. Slowly, the shadow became less an enemy, more a teacher. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To disappear from society is not to chase the light, but to descend into darkness until you find the hidden spark. Elias, in his solitude, was learning this ancient alchemy. Yet society did not see his progress. Friends drifted away entirely. Some mocked him. Others pitied him. Few understood that what looked like retreat was initiation. This is the tragedy of the spiritually awake. They vanish not to abandon the world, but to return to it more whole. But until the transformation is complete, they must bear the misunderstanding of others. And this is the test for you as well. If you are vanishing, know that misunderstanding will come. You may be called distant, strange, broken. But Jung would whisper the true sickness is to remain asleep. To leave society's stage is not abandonment, it is courage. The fortress dream returned to Elias, but this time the child was no longer crying. He was waiting for Elias to come and open the gates. Jung would say the self is patient. It waits for you to grow strong enough to face it. Every step into silence, every confrontation with shadow, every lonely night in the wilderness is a step closer to that meeting. And when that meeting comes, you will understand why the spiritually awake must disappear, because only in disappearance can the imprisoned child be freed, and only in freedom can the self be born. The fortress dream haunted Elias until one night. In the silence that had become both his torment and his teacher, something shifted. This time, when he approached the iron gates, they were already open. The black waters still lapped at the walls. But within, the crying child stood waiting, no longer powerless, but radiant with a strange light. Elias woke in tears, not of fear, but of recognition. Jung would call this the conjunctio, the sacred union between the conscious self and the deeper self. It does not arrive as triumph, but as reconciliation. The one who vanishes from society is not escaping life. He is preparing for this meeting, this marriage of soul and ego. And when it comes, it changes everything. Elias began to notice that the world outside looked different. The same streets, the same people, the same conversations, but they no longer imprisoned him. Where once he saw only the hollowness of superficial roles, now he saw symbols. Each gesture, each mask, each ritual was part of the great dance of the collective psyche. He no longer despised it, nor did he long to return. He observed, as one who had stepped outside the play yet could appreciate its meaning. Jung warned that this stage, the first illumination after descent, was dangerous if mistaken for completion. Many fall into arrogance, imagining themselves enlightened while secretly still enslaved to ego. Elias felt this temptation, the subtle pride of thinking he had outgrown others. But the self humbled him. The child from the dream appeared again, reminding him, "Do not mistake my light for yours. You are only the vessel." Have you felt this too? That surge of clarity when your silence bears fruit, when you feel wiser than those still sleepwalking? Beware. Jung cautioned that spiritual inflation, the ego's theft of the self's power, is a trap more dangerous than conformity. To believe oneself chosen, superior, beyond others, is to fall into a new prison, gilded but suffocating. The true work is integration, not escape. Elias began to integrate by turning inward even more deeply. He confronted not only his shadow but also the figures Jung called the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies that shape our psyche. For Elias, the anima appeared in dreams as a woman cloaked in silver, guiding him through forests and rivers, whispering truths he did not yet understand. She was not fantasy, but symbol and inner archetype leading him toward balance. And this is essential for anyone disappearing from society. The outer world may fall away, but the inner world swells with figures, guides, and opponents. The task is not to suppress them, but to listen, to learn, to weave them into the tapestry of the soul. The anima for men, the animus for women. These inner guides are bridges to the self. To ignore them is to remain half-formed. Elias followed the silver-cloaked figure through many dreams. Sometimes she led him to dark caverns where serpents writhed, sometimes to meadows bathed in impossible light. Each vision taught him something about courage, about surrender, about trust in the deeper currents of life. Slowly, the fortress within dissolved. The child's light grew stronger. Elias felt less fragmented, more whole. And yet, the world outside had not changed. His absence was still felt. Invitations had ceased. Old friends had stopped asking. His name was less and less spoken. Spiritually awake people do not just disappear, they are erased. Society forgets them, because they no longer feed its machinery. Jung would say this is inevitable. Individuation is always misunderstood by the collective. But Elias was no longer wounded by this erasure. In solitude, he discovered something society could never give: sovereignty. He realized he was not defined by their recognition. He existed beyond their narratives. And this is the paradox in disappearing. He had finally appeared to himself. Here lies the seed of transformation. When you vanish, when you endure the exile, when you face shadow and reconcile with self, you become ungovernable by the collective, not rebellious for its own sake, but free in the deepest sense. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to beg for approval. You carry within you the authority of your own soul. And yet, Jung would warn sovereignty is not isolation. The individuated one is not meant to remain forever in the wilderness. The path circles back. The awakened must eventually return, not to lose themselves again, but to offer what they have found. Elias felt this stirring, though faintly. His silence had transformed him. But the question arose, what now? Would he live forever as a ghost, unseen and unheard? Or was the time approaching to step back into the world, not as a mask, but as a mirror? This is the question every spiritually awake person must face. Disappearance is the crucible, but it is not the end. If you have vanished, if you are vanishing, the self will one day call you to reappear, not as who you were, but as who you truly are. And when that day comes, you will know that your exile was not a curse, but a blessing, not abandonment, but preparation. Elias's dreams grew quieter now, less violent, more serene. The silver-cloaked woman still appeared, But now she walked beside him, no longer leading, no longer distant. The child's light had merged with his own. He felt whole, not perfect, but reconciled. And in that wholeness, he sensed the faint pull of return. Elias woke one morning to a silence that no longer felt empty. The house was still, but something inside him had shifted. The air seemed alive, as though every breath carried a hidden meaning. He walked to the window and saw the same street, the same world, yet it no longer bound him. The exile had not ended, but it had ripened into something else, readiness. Jung believed that individuation was not merely for the self, but for the world. The awakened one does not vanish into private bliss. They disappear so they can return transformed, carrying a seed for humanity's future. To awaken is to step out of the collective trance, but to mature is to bring back what was found in the wilderness. This is the hero's return. Joseph Campbell would echo Jung here, the archetypal journey of descent, transformation, and re-entry. Elias resisted at first. He had grown attached to his solitude. To re-enter the world felt like contamination, like surrendering to the same noise he had escaped, but the self whispered otherwise. The child of light in his dreams did not want endless isolation, it wanted embodiment. What good is gold if it remains hidden in the crucible? The alchemist must pour it back into the world. And so Elias began cautiously. He attended a gathering, but this time he did not wear the mask of persona. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried a weight that surprised even him. People looked at him differently, not all, not most, but a few. They sensed something altered. Some leaned in with curiosity, others pulled away in discomfort. Jung knew this too. When you embody yourself, you will polarize. Some will be magnetized, others repelled. This is not failure. It is the natural effect of authenticity. Have you felt this in your own life, that when you speak from a deeper place, the room grows tense? Some understand immediately, others turn cold. The spiritually awake are disruptive simply by existing. Their presence is a mirror, and mirrors make people uneasy. Elias saw this clearly. His old friends no longer recognized him. Their jokes fell flat. Their routines felt hollow. But new connections emerged. As if summoned by his transformation, a stranger he met on a train spoke words that echoed his very dreams. A book appeared in his path that contained the answers to questions he had only whispered. Synchronicities multiplied, guiding him not back to the old world, but into a new one. This is the quiet truth Jung revealed when you awaken. Your world reorganizes itself. People leave, others appear. The invisible threads of destiny tighten, and though society as a whole may still misunderstand, you are no longer lost in its labyrinth. You carry your own compass now. But Jung never allowed complacency. He warned that every return carries a cost. To re-enter society with yourself intact requires vigilance. The persona will always attempt to reclaim you, to seduce you back into its mask. The shadow will test you, asking whether your integration is real or merely imagined. And the collective will pressure you, sometimes subtly, sometimes brutally, to conform again. Elias felt these pressures immediately. Invitations returned, but with them came expectations to gossip, to perform, to smile where he no longer wished to smile. The temptation was strong. Put the mask back on, and you will belong. But Elias had tasted another belonging, the belonging to his own soul. And once you have known that, there is no return to slavery. And so he chose carefully. He did not isolate, nor did he drown in collective demands. He practiced the art of conscious boundaries. Jung called this individuation in action, the ability to be in the world, but not of it, to engage without being consumed. Elias learned to say no without guilt, to say yes without betrayal. His presence became precise, his silence intentional. And here is where your journey enters the frame. If you too have disappeared, the day will come when you must reappear, not as the old self, not as the mask, but as something new. The danger is to vanish forever, mistaking avoidance for awakening. The task is to re-enter consciously, to bring back the gold of your exile. Elias' final dream in this cycle revealed the truth. He stood again before the fortress. But this time, there was no fortress, only open fields stretching endlessly, lit by the same radiant child who now walked at his side. "You disappeared," the child said, "so you could return, not to the old world, but to your true one." And with that, Elias knew the disappearance was never about vanishing from society. It was about vanishing from illusion, from falseness, from everything that betrayed the self. What remained was not absence but presence, the kind of presence that shifts the air, that awakens others without words. So why are spiritually awake people quietly disappearing from society? Because they are being remade. Because they cannot breathe in the old atmosphere of masks and scripts. Because the soul will not tolerate betrayal forever. They disappear not as rejection, but as preparation for a deeper return, one that carries the possibility of healing not just for themselves, but for all. And now, the choice rests with you. Do you vanish into sleep again, wearing the mask of conformity, or do you vanish into the crucible, risking the exile, enduring the shadows, so that you may re-emerge as who you truly are? Jung would say your soul already knows the answer. If you feel this truth stirring in you, comment, "I walk the path of the hidden self." Your transformation is not isolation, but initiation, not abandonment, but a gift to the collective. Your journey serves not just your awakening, but humanity's evolution. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.